Picture an enterprise data center in 2009. Down one aisle, the servers. Down another, the storage, a SAN, a refrigerator-sized array that could cost as much as a house, humming in a cold room, guarded by its own team who spoke their own language. Somewhere else, the network. 3 separate kingdoms, 3 separate bills, 3 separate sets of administrators who mostly met in meetings to argue about whose fault the outage was. And nobody asked why. The industry even had a name for its best answer to the mess. Converged infrastructure. Dell's vStart, VCE's vBlock, the Cisco and NetApp FlexPod. The pitch was simple: take the 3 kingdoms, bolt them to a single pallet, and ship them pre-argued. It didn't remove the silos, it shrink-wrapped them. For 20 years, this was just what a data center cost. But a handful of companies didn't build this way. Inside Google and the other hyperscalers, there was no vanity hardware and no island of storage. Just commodity x86 boxes, storage sitting local to the compute that used it. The whole thing automated, repeatable, cheap. The rest of the enterprise was locked out of that world by price and complexity. This is the story of a company that spent 15 years tearing down the walls of that old data center, one silo at a time, until there was almost nothing left to lock you in. This is how Nutanix broke the silos. Nutanix was founded in 2009. First employee in 2010, first venture money the same year, and the first wall it went after was the oldest and most expensive one, the line between the servers and the SAN. The idea was almost heretical. Take the storage out of that costly central array and spread it across the ordinary servers themselves, then stitch it all together in software. They called it the Nutanix distributed file system. The storage lived right next to the compute that needed it, the way it did inside Google. The SAN that guarded refrigerator simply had no job anymore. They launched it into the world at VMworld in 2011, a tiny booth in a hall built to worship Big Iron. And they gave the product a name that tells you exactly what they thought they were doing. The Nutanix Converged Virtualization Appliance. Yes, they really called it that. The whole category earned a cleaner name soon after, Hyper-Converged Infrastructure, HCI. But a clever architecture doesn't sell itself. It needs one workload that proves it, the way Space Invaders sold the Atari and Mario sold the NES. Nutanix found its killer app in the least glamorous corner of enterprise IT, virtual desktops. VDI was a graveyard in those years. Run hundreds of virtual desktops off a traditional SAN, have them all boot at 9 AM on a Monday, and the shared storage would buckle under the boot storm. The experience was miserable and the economics were worse. But distributed storage, local to each host, ate boot storms for breakfast. It just worked. Here's the number that stunned even Nutanix. Roughly 80% of its first $100 million in revenue came from VDI, and about 80% of that came from the federal government, where security, not cost, was driving desktops into the data center. VDI was the killer workload that proved hyperconvergence was real. Now, the tidy version of a startup story skips the part where it almost dies. This one nearly died more than once. Their G4 hardware generation started locking up in the field, a problem traced to the LSI storage controllers inside. Nutanix ordered a stop ship, froze its own product mid-sale. Out of that crisis came something that outlived it. They built one-click upgrades and lifecycle management, so the platform could heal and update itself. The disaster became a feature. Then VMware, whose hypervisor Nutanix was shipping on, sent a cease and desist, telling them to stop bundling it. That letter could have ended the company. Instead, it lit a fuse. Nutanix built Foundation, its own way to lay down a hypervisor, and quietly decided it would never again let another vendor hold that switch. Remember that. It matters in a minute. And then the hardware itself nearly finished them. A nasty bug in VMware's ESX 4.1 caused soft lockups on the Nutanix controller. VMware acknowledged it and declined to fix it, and Nutanix spent months telling customers, please do not upgrade. The thing that finally saved them was mundane. In 2013, Intel shipped SATA solid-state drives the same physical size as the old spinning disks. Suddenly, Nutanix could build on standard Supermicro hardware again. Shipping resumed, And a couple of months later came the first $10 million quarter. They were so relieved they rented out a screening of the new Star Trek movie for customers. The company had barely survived, now back to that fuse. Having survived on someone else's hypervisor and having been threatened with it, Nutanix built its own. In 2015, at its .next conference, it introduced the Acropolis Hypervisor, AHV, live migration, snapshots and clones, VM operations, dynamic networking, the machinery an enterprise expected, folded into the platform at no extra license. That was the second wall coming down. For decades, running virtual machines meant paying the hypervisor toll forever. AHV made the virtualization layer just another feature of the box you already owned, not a tax you repaid every year. By the mid-2010s, AHV adoption was climbing fast across the customer base, and the analysts who'd ignored the startup started naming it a leader. In 2016, Nutanix went public, ticker NTNX. The next wall wasn't hardware at all. It was the gap between a virtual machine and a modern containerized application. The enterprise was moving to Kubernetes, and Kubernetes on your own gear was notoriously painful to stand up, and worse, to keep running for years. Nutanix's answer arrived through acquisition. In December 2023, it bought the assets of a company called D2iQ, formerly Mesosphere, and with them a hardened enterprise-grade Kubernetes platform. That became the foundation of the Nutanix Kubernetes Platform, NKP, launched in 2024, which absorbed Nutanix's earlier Kubernetes engine, once called Carbon, and replaced it. With NKP, the same platform that had dissolved the SAN and absorbed the hypervisor, now ran your containers too, on-prem, at the edge, with the day 2 operations built in. The app layer stopped being its own separate silo with its own separate specialists. It became one more thing the platform just handled, which left the last and biggest wall of all, the one between your data center and the public cloud. For most of the 2010s, that was a one-way door. You could rebuild your apps for a cloud provider's native services, or you could stay home. Migrating meant re-architecting, and re-architecting meant risk. Nutanix went at that wall the same way it went at all the others. It made the data center itself portable. It started on AWS in August 2020 and grew into Nutanix Cloud Clusters, NC2, running the full Nutanix stack on bare metal instances inside the hyperscalers. NC2 on Microsoft Azure reached general availability in October 2022, starting in North America and widening across regions through 2023. Same platform, same Prism console, same skills your team already had, now running in someone else's cloud. Lift an application from your server room to AWS or Azure without rewriting it and move it back if you like. The wall between on-premises and public cloud, the one everyone said was permanent, became a door you could walk through both ways. Look back at the whole run, and it's the same move, 4 times. Find a wall everyone had accepted as the cost of doing business, then dissolve it into software. The SAN, that guarded refrigerator, gone into the servers. The hypervisor toll, gone into the platform. The Kubernetes silo, gone into one operations model. The border between your data center and the cloud, gone into a door. We owe you the honest shadow, the same way we do every episode. Tax is our word, not a line item. VMware and the SAN vendors would tell the story differently, and consolidating everything onto one platform is its own kind of lock-in, just a friendlier one. Both of those things are true, but the direction of travel is not in dispute. Every one of those 15 years, a wall that used to define enterprise IT quietly stopped mattering. And when the last silo falls, you're left with the thing Nutanix was reaching for from that first booth in 2011. Run your apps and your data anywhere, on-prem, at the edge, or inside the public cloud, on one platform, with one set of skills. Any app, anywhere. The old data center was a set of kingdoms that spent 20 years arguing about whose fault the outage was. What replaced it doesn't have the walls to argue across. If you run infrastructure for a living, that's not nostalgia. That's Monday. This has been Giants and Gadgets of Tech.